Make the introduction.
Because you don't know the name?
Precisely.
Bro, if we ever had like a fan and we meet them, you're just gonna be like, yeah, we're...
Shelf.
Your shelf, I'm Scream.
This is Shelf, that's Scream. And this is our Ryan.
Welcome back to Between Alex and Ryan.
Alright, are you ready?
Oh, my ears are poking out. Okay.
Alright, 3, 2, 1.
Our thumbnail? Just always thumbs up.
Lame. Alright.
Okay.
You ready?
Yes.
Alright.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Alright.
Hey everyone, I'm Alex.
I'm Ryan.
And this is our new podcast called Between Shelf and Screen. Want to explain a little bit what we're going to do?
Yeah, so in this podcast, we're going to be reviewing both the book and the book's adaptation. So we plan on releasing weekly episodes, and in the first week, we'll review and analyze the book. And in the following episode, we're going to compare the book and the movie and kind of go in more detail about if the movie was a good adaptation, if it was worth the watch, and everything.
Yeah, we'll compare the two to tell you which one's worth your time.
Yes, or if both of them are.
Yeah.
So, and this week we want to cover The Martian. Already unprepared. Oh, shit, my book's over there.
We're keeping this in, dude.
Clearly, we're very prepared.
I like her copy better. I have the paperback.
I got the unsponsored Book of the Month
Yeah.
copy.
See, like, I always love paperbacks because they're so much more durable and, like, but, like, hardbacks just look better on a shelf.
Right. Yeah, I definitely appreciate them for my bookshelf, but, like, when actually reading, like, I take the cover off.
Yeah.
Because I don't
want to get crumpled.
Right.
But
And
then,
it definitely will be.
I want to show them the creases. Look at these creases. Look at them.
This is what this podcast is all about. The actual book, how it looks. We haven't read it yet, actually.
We should do a whole podcast based on that.
I
bet you there's YouTubers that have already done that.
Oh, yeah. Just reviewing the book, but it's only by appearance in the cover.
But yeah, Martian.
Yes. So, we have actually read this book. I know. Didn't seem like that coming into this. But we're going to start with how we just overall star rating felt.
I think we should start with a little disclaimer because we've both seen the movie before we've read the book.
Yes, right.
This is not the usual order that we're going to do it in.
Right. But since it was such a hit when it first came out, I saw it like in theaters however many years ago. Oh my gosh. I can't remember now.
Yeah, so this is like my dad's favorite movie, so I've seen it, so many times.
Really?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, my dad is obsessed with this movie.
And you never read the book before that?
No.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I've always wanted to, but then I was just like, well, I know the story.
Yeah, I had only saw it the first time it came out, and then I liked it at that point, and then never thought of it again until now. Oh my gosh. So I genuinely did not remember. I knew the general plot that this happens on Mars, but other than that, I did not know anything about this. I couldn't even remember the main character's name.
Right, she's going to be more of a, I guess, like, litmus test as to, like, book first, then movie adaptation sort of thing. Because I've seen it so many times, I could probably tell you, like, everything scene by scene.
Yeah, so you went into the book kind of already knowing, expecting. Yeah. Well, I was the opposite. Even though I had seen the movie, it just went right past my head.
Yeah, it just went
gone. It was gone. So, yes. Disclaimer said, I think we should get into our star rating of the book.
Okay, you go first.
I put this book, I gave it about a 4 to 4.25. 4.25 specifically considering that it was a debut novel by Andy Weir. And I thought this book was impressive for being a debut. However, it would probably be more about a 4, taking that aspect out of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say between a 4 to a 4.25.
I'm going to say, just because I liked it, I think I really like this book. So I don't want to say 4.5 because I feel like that's too generous. So probably like 4.3. I'm not very good at star rating systems, by the way, but I really enjoyed this book.
His is going to be scuffed. All his star ratings.
yeah. Just ignore mine. Like I'm not used to doing that, but I loved it. I really did love this book.
We'll get into our specific likes and dislikes because I definitely had some things that I had issues with.
Yeah, same here. But like I think if we're talking about like pros versus cons, pros this much, cons this much. Teensy tiny. Yeah. Like overall, like I thought just the plot as it went on, like it's incredibly mundane, like all the stuff that like Mark Watney, the main guy, like he's stuck on Mars. If you didn't know that.
Yeah, and I'll go I guess that'll lead me right into my kind of summary of the book.
Okay. Yeah.
So I said, just to generalize, summarize, spoiler free, that this book is about a specialized botany astronaut, and
engineer.
And yeah, partial engineer and a poop enthusiast.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a big plot point in the book.
Mm-hmm.
And he is presumed dead after an accident while fleeing Mars. We follow his journey over this major road block in order for him to reach Earth again.
Yeah.
So.
Oh. Actually, I read like half this book like 2 years ago. And, like it was on my mom's Audible.
So you didn't even read it. You're like basically listening to the movie.
It was like one of those free Audible credits you get per month, and like you have to use it within a month. Yeah. And like I was reading different things on my mom's Audible. I like bought a lot of credits. I was listening to like Star Wars books, and then I got halfway through this one. I was really enjoying it, and then it just took it off my library.
You finally got to approach it again.
Yes, no,
you were stuck on Earth. You couldn't reach Mars.
Yeah.
You were so close, and then Audible took it away from you.
Yeah. Stupid.
So this podcast is actually your journey on reaching Mars.
This is me absolutely pooping on Audible.
You're a poop enthusiast too, along with Mark Watney.
Me and Mark. So okay, we got our rating out of the way and like kind of plot. Can I get the like specifics now?
I think maybe we should just generalize cover
plot,
characters. Yeah.
Okay, so this is gonna kind of sound funny. This isn't gonna have any spoilers, but the plot, like it manages to like keep you engaged while he's just doing the most mundane kind of like boring mechanical stuff. But since like the stakes of where he's at, like he's trapped on Mars. That's the whole plot of the book. That's not a spoiler. But like since like everything that he's doing is like literally crucial to like his life, and like every single little like experiment he does or like thing that could go wrong like could literally cost him his life. So like everything he does is super mundane and like super mechanical, and it goes into like really good scientific detail. It's really accurate. Apparently Neil deGrasse Tyson, I think it was like he went on Joe Rogan's podcast like a while ago, and he said this is like the most scientifically accurate book or story that's just ever been told. And or something said
Andy Weir was he studied like science.
Yeah, it says it in the back. I'll find it.
Well,
built as a career. Okay, yes. Andy Weir built a career as a software engineer until the success of his first novel, The Martian. It's crazy, his first one, but yeah. Allowed him to live out his dream of full-time marriage. He's a lifelong space nerd and a devoted hobbyist of such subjects such as relativistic physics, orbital mechanics, and the history of manned spaceflight. So man's a nerd, but like, it's dope. Because this guy went in extreme detail, and everything's super mundane. It'll keep you involved because the stakes are so high. Like if he makes one little mistake, it could cost him his life. So like, if you're super into like, I would say any sort of science, like space travel, or like if you're a very like engineer minded person, or like you really love to think about how things work and like science behind those things, or just like anything like that, if you're a fanatic, you're going to love this book because it's like it's just full of that. And like I'm not usually interested in that sort of stuff. Like I am, but I'm not. But like it says something like that I'm like not crazy about it, and I was able like to be so fascinated and like listen. And
right. Yeah, I would definitely say for the general population though that like if you are not at all amused by scientific and like theories, like really diving into the theory. That's not a word. I almost said theoryism. Anyways, clearly I don't know English.
just science, like engineering,
if you
botany.
If you aren't the type of person to be interested in going into those topics in very specific detail, like if you don't want to read about that, then I would say that maybe this book wouldn't interest you because it's very heavily concentrated.
I would argue that I would argue against that. Like I think like as like the basic populace could probably really enjoy this because like even though as he's doing this, you're getting like a taste for his personality because it's written in like log format. So like he's typing this in on a computer at the end of the day, just like logging like it's like a journal, and like he's going in very like extreme detail, but like at the same time as he's like telling you all about this, he's like giving his personality as well, and like you kind of. And like I said, you stay engaged because it's like the stakes are so high, and I think that's like really impressive. Like,
it's impressive, even though I don't necessarily agree. I don't know because I think it's not complicated where like the general population couldn't understand it because he does such an amazing job breaking it down. So it's all in like you don't need to study this to know the terminology and everything, but I think if you are just like someone that doesn't necessarily like hearing about theories or care for like the scientific background of stuff, that you might not enjoy reading this because it's so heavily concentrated, even though you get a lot of humor throughout this book, which I think is another great thing that the author did.
Yeah.
Like it was actually entertaining and made me laugh out loud.
Mark Watney's really funny.
Yeah.
And like I mean, can we get into like the characters kind of?
Yes.
So like,
we'll jump into that.
Mark Watney, obviously, you're spending the most time with him, and he's like a great character, very funny.
You're stuck with him.
Painfully optimistic. Like, well, that is maybe a critique I could bring up because like he is so like he's almost so optimistic and just like so like he never had like he has moments where he kind of lashes out and he complains, but he almost seems infallible in the sense that like this man just like gets put through the ringer, extreme isolation, and just like the worst sort of like scenario you could be in, and it never once gets dark. He's just kind of like funny and like lighthearted the whole time, which is not that realistic, and that's like a subjective critique, I think. But I think I do love the light tone and like the humor and like what he was going for was definitely that, and he succeeded. However, I don't know. I feel like it could have taken a different sort of tone at times and make it super dark, and like it didn't really show the psychological effects of being like severely isolated and just like being put through all of this like hardship.
Yeah, being stuck in a vehicle full of your own poo.
Yeah, it's disgusting. It's disgusting. Like, I would drive me insane. Like, it would drive anybody insane. I feel like even like I get that he's like an astronaut, and astronauts are supposed to be like the most, like, just like the best, well-rounded, smartest, and capable sort of people. But like, I don't like. I think it would still get to him, especially if you're alone on a different planet. Like, that's craziness.
I actually think that's every introvert's dream.
Yeah, every introvert's dream.
Yeah, I mean, imagine you realize, wow, genuinely no one can bother me on this planet. It definitely didn't cover topics, but I don't think that made it any less unrealistic because it never really touched on how, like, it didn't do the opposite, saying, like, he is happy beyond belief. Like, nothing could go wrong and all that. Like, he definitely was shown in a more positive manner, but it didn't say, like, you know, it didn't make him seem like he had no issues. I guess.
Yeah, like it's not like he was like without issues, but I feel like the psychological effects were just kind of ignored because like the man like would be like, "Oh, I'm lonely, I'll sleep it off," like, and it's like kind of funny. Everybody's like, "Haha," but like in reality, if you were to make it more realistic, I feel like subjective review that it would like I wouldn't mind if the book bounced back and forth, or like at least Watney went back and forth between like just this funny guy that's just like, oh, hope I make it, and between this guy that's just like, I'm losing my mind. I feel like that would have added some depth and some realism, which I like realism. When it comes to characters, that's all I really care about as far as realism. Like if your characters are real, then I love it. But like that's like it's not really like it's not really a critique where I could say it's objective because like it's totally up to my opinion and like it literally works fine without it and it's like I wouldn't lower the star rating because of it, but I don't know. Yeah, that's just one thing that I kind of bugged me. But other than that, really nothing.
Yeah, which I think taking that, would you say that this is more of a character-driven novel or a book?
Plot.
Or plot,
yeah, definitely plot. A book-driven book.
Yeah, a plot-driven. I would agree. It's more focused on the plot and just the story. Of his journey and trying to get him back.
I think the author really just want to talk about space and like Mars.
That too.
I think
and like going into his theories of what would happen on the planet, which I think this kind of leads into us getting into spoilers, maybe.
Yeah.
So I would say if this doesn't interest you, spoiler warning.
Spoiler.
Don't listen anymore if you want to read this book, because we will be going into detail of certain scenes and.
Spoiler alert. Hey, Bella. This is a dog. I'm petting a dog. All right, you're given so much time right now. If you don't want to hear the spoilers, we literally said it multiple times.
Yeah, we had a dog breaking everything.
Yeah, so spoilers. All right, go.
Yeah. So, I guess, let me pull up my notes. Getting into the first kind of beginning of the book. This still happens in the beginning, but it's, it's getting more on, like, if you're interested and you don't want to know this. First part is very early on. The science is, like, just hits you like a truck. Like, this talking about theories and how he's going to make water and grow plants and all that. And there was a lot of talk about poop. How did that make you feel?
Dude, I loved it. I was there for it.
I feel like some people could find it, like, very childish,
yeah, but it's like also fascinating.
Yeah, it's definitely made it in a way where you could tell it was a joke, but like it all made sense. It wasn't just throwing it out there, like throwing poop at a wall.
Yeah.
Like he had a reason for bringing it up, and it was to like help, obviously, fertilize the plants he was trying to grow to sustain himself, which it was helpful for him being the botany scientist, where he knew how to find a way to sustain some sort of plant life, which was honestly really impressive, diving into actually what could be a way to grow things in Mars, which of course this was in the HAB, which was a space building that he was in where there was oxygen going in through that and everything.
Yeah, you get real familiar with the HAB.
Yes, so it's where he spends most of his time.
Yeah.
Get very comfortable in that. Another point was he went into the specifics of turning, water?
Yeah.
Turning...
jet fuel into water.
Yes, into water.
You heat hydrogen or hydrazines, jet fuel at a certain temperature, and then it separates from hydrogen from oxygen, and then, it creates water.
Yes.
Connects them.
Yeah,
that's what
he's producing more.
The science is tough, but yeah.
As a chem major, I feel like I should be able to explain this, but it's fine. We're talking about books here. But I found it.
Hydrazine.
I found it very interesting, and while reading it, I was like, this makes so much sense. But it was like pages of explaining it and going through this process, which was very interesting. And it wasn't like he didn't know exactly because he wasn't the chemist, but they're kind of trained in all sorts of fields to be an astronaut.
Yeah.
He knew a little part, and he did
Renaissance man.
Yes, he did mess up once.
Stuff up,
yeah, which I feel like it would have been more extreme. I mean, he was making literal hydrogen, which is very flammable.
Yeah. Well, there's some part where he's trying to burn it off.
Yes. And so he's burning hydrogen. Very not great idea. I will say that.
Yeah.
I mean, we know how it all went in the, what was the balloon called?
For what?
The big balloon that exploded.
The one that was shot down by the F-22? China's balloon? What are you talking about right now?
So, like, when they
yeah. I don't remember the name, but yeah, it's the one that Germany had.
Yes.
During World War One. Yeah.
Yeah, but like very first.
Lindenberg, I think.
I think you're right. Yeah, the Hindenburg.
Hindenburg,
yes. Clearly we're also very cultured in history. Wow.
Oh God.
So, not a great idea. But I feel like he kind of got that out a little too easy, and I feel like
He had like a big conflict with that.
He did, but like it didn't tear a hole in the hab. I don't know. I feel like burning hydrogen, it's messy, and that was kind of the first conflict we had, which was entertaining, but like I don't know. He kind of got off a little escape.
I would say honestly, I'm gonna disagree. Because like he went through so many trials. Like there was that. There was just like. So many. Like I remember at one point towards the end, like, okay, yeah, another spoiler. This is like we're going way farther in the plot, but like, there's so many parts like where he runs into troubles. It's like catastrophic. Like after the hab like explodes, launches him out like however far, and then all his potatoes die, and then after that he's just like, all right, well I'm going to travel to like this next site where we have the rocket, and then I'm going to get there, just drive there. It'll be super easy, and then he drives there, and not only does he like flip the rover, and then after he flips the rover, he runs into a massive dust storm, and then he has to go around that because like the what's it called, solar panels won't absorb the energy. But then after like there's just so many, and like I was just like, man, like that is an intense amount of problems all to have back to back. And I remember at a certain point I was reading it, I'm just like, first off. That is maybe another critique, subjective, of course, but like these last however many 60 pages, like there were so many troubles going on, and like that's fine, like it builds up the tension. But I was just like, I was exhausted. I was just like, Jesus Christ!
You're just being like, this ain't working out. I'm just staying on Mars, I guess.
Yeah, I wanted to just like get to the point where like he was actually reunited with the crew, and I was just like, I feel like at like especially up to the point like where he flipped the rover, I would have just liked a time lapse, and then he's there, because I was just like, this is stressful to read. Like, there's so many problems going wrong, and like, I feel like that one, especially at first, like when he was burning the hydrogen and it blows up, like he definitely got off lucky, but at the same time, it's like setting him up for like bigger problems. I feel like that's a good plot point.
Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like at the beginning, I would think you'd be the most vulnerable because it's such an unexpected. Obviously, you didn't think that you'd be stranded on Mars, and yeah, you're trained to a certain extent, but you think you'd be in the most shock at that point and trying to figure out a plan to make enough water to grow food to keep you alive to last another 4 years before the next ship comes out, because he still didn't have contact with Earth at this point. So he couldn't say like, hey guys, I'm alive, come send another ship. He had to wait 4 years and make enough food to last him to that point. Like, I feel like he might have these ideas, but he wouldn't be in the right mind space to be fully hashing them out to the point where like, yeah, maybe a mistake happens or two, but it was like, oopsie daisy, anyways, fixed it the next day. I don't know, I just feel like
you felt like he wasn't shocked enough?
Yeah.
Well, so you kind of agree with me as far as like the psychological effects.
Oh, yeah. It was definitely off-putting trying to put myself into his shoes.
Because I would have been devastated. Like, I would have been like, well, I'm dying.
But we're also not astronauts.
Yeah. But like also just like on a human level, like you gotta, I feel like that was not explored enough. Because obviously, like, the man didn't make this to be a psychological thriller or like
that
a
would
horror.
Be cool.
I mean, it could have gone in that direction too. Like, he was totally capable of doing that. But that wasn't what he wanted to make the book about. Obviously, it was about science and like space travel, Mars, astronauts. Like, he just loves that stuff. Obviously, so I think we just kind of like we both liked the book for what it is and whatever he was trying to accomplish. Like he did. But at the same time, like, I feel like me and you kind of wanted something different.
From the actual book. Yeah, this definitely isn't my typical book I would pick up. I like sci-fi, but I don't technically go out of my way for it.
I go out of my way for it.
But I feel like still this kind of sci-fi, even though I feel like this fits like the perfect definition because it's so much realistic science but put in a fictional world of
that's a good point. It kind of goes back to like original sci-fi, like when they're playing with like scientific ideas, and it's not like Star Wars, which I also enjoy that, but like it's not like that where you have like Jedi using the Force.
Right. It's not like changing just how the way the world works. Like it's still using real life
science.
Which I love that kind of stuff. I mean, as a chem major, I have to have some interest or else I'm not going to make it through. But it's not technically what I would reach for immediately, I guess, even though this has been on my list for a while. And there's a reason why it's been on my list for a while, I guess.
And honestly, like, I'm trying to think, like, if I had never seen the movie, would I pick this book up too? That's a good question. Would you?
I feel like, I mean, you were the one that suggested this book.
Yeah.
And I feel like that played a big part. And I thought about it. I did have, before this, I bought Project Hail Mary. I was interested in Project Hail Mary, but I bought, what's his other book? Artemis, I think it is.
Something like that, yeah. Artemis something.
Yeah. Also haven't read it, if you couldn't tell. I don't know the title of it, but I did buy it.
I want to read more of his stuff.
I do want to read more of his, but I was interested in that more so, probably because I was like, I know I've seen The Martian, like the movie. I could probably skip this for now, like put it off. I'm glad that I did end up reading it. I think it's, if you are interested in sci-fi in general, I think this is 100% worth your time, like just definition sci-fi.
I think everybody could enjoy it.
Yeah.
Like, it's just a solid book.
Yeah. It definitely is. And for a debut.
Yeah, that's impressive.
Yes. I'm sure he's
I wish I could just write a book.
But I feel like he's probably wrote a lot of just scientific journals throughout, like, in his career.
Yeah, and he's probably wrote a few books beforehand that he tried to get, like, or he probably didn't even want to try to publish.
Or, like, short stories or something. And yeah, that led him to this idea.
I just want to be Andy Weir, man.
We'll just change majors. Change to a software engineer and work your way up.
Dude, yeah. Like, I literally had a full career going as a software engineer, which is a good career field. And then he's like, let's be an author. And then he did it.
Yeah. And he's still trucking.
Dude, yeah, he's still making books. And, like, well, this is kind of off, like, on a tangent a little bit, but I think somebody's complaint about Project Hail Mary was it was basically like this book, but different. Mm-hmm. It was like the same concept, like somebody stranded on a planet or whatever. Yeah. I still want to read it, though.
Yeah, I'm still definitely interested in it. I feel like there's so much that you could go with this.
Yeah, no. Yeah, we literally kind of said it. We're like, oh, I wish like this, I had this story, but it was like a psychological thriller.
That would be.
That's my bread and butter.
Yeah.
I love horror, and I love like Shirley Jackson, and she's big on like the psychological horror, and like that's mine. I just love it.
Yeah,
and Stephen King does that too. I feel like.
Oh yeah, he ties in a lot of psychological, just reactions and where your mind's at in that point. But I feel like I love anything that just touches on the mind. I love just literary fiction too. Mm-hmm. Like just contemporary. Like I like just thinking. I like just having something to just dive into. It doesn't even have to be anything special or like absurd. Like even like the most simplest thing, I could just go into detail. If it's written well, I could just dive into.
Yeah. No, yeah. It all depends on the writing style.
Yeah.
And actually, I want to touch on this writing style. It's like, this is like the most accessible book that I've read in a hot minute. Mm-hmm. And by that I mean like you don't need comparing it to like probably the author that uses the most like $12 words every other sentence, like Lovecraft. Comparing it to like his sort of like lofty, flowery prose, like this is nothing like that. Yeah. And like that's why I say it's super accessible, because like I feel like you could hand this book to, I don't know, like 5th or 6th grader and they do just fine. Like they probably breeze through it actually.
And I think the setup of the book, like it being written through the journal entries, like Mark's journal entries, is first of all one of my favorite like kind of tropes, I guess, is when it's through the journal. I
love that too.
Yeah, it feels so personable and it's easy to understand, and I feel like it's more like it usually uses language, everyday language.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of getting at, because like that's like such an advantage of writing like first person too. Is like you don't have to necessarily get into like the lofty prose. Like you could just like talk like how you imagine your character talking, and then like, and that's what he does here. And like it's so easy. It's so easy to get into. Like,
which some people really don't like that. Like they want.
Yeah, they want to be pretentious.
They
want to be pretentious and be like, yeah, is that just popular fiction?
Which we're also not trying to hate on the people that like
I'm gonna hate on you a little bit. I'm gonna hate on you a little bit if you're gonna sit there and be like, look, only read literary fiction. Like that's lame. Like get out there and read other things.
Wow. Okay, I get it. No.
I'm gonna be controversial.
If people are reading like whatever you enjoy, I'm like, go off, alright?
You know, but it's not you because you read this and you were like, I liked it.
If people like the fluffy, flowery stuff, like I get it. I enjoy that in certain concepts, but I also like things that I can just read through. And there's definitely parts of this book where you can dive into. And I'll get into like some quotes that I was like, dang, okay, that made me like think about this not just in this book, but like my own kind of like life and struggles and all that. Mm-hmm. And I'll get into that later. But if you're like dissing on other people, like I know you're doing it in a joking manner, but like actually saying like, wow, you read something like that, that's so easy, like that's not cool. You know, if someone is reading and says they enjoy a book, like just let them be, you know?
Yeah, but I kind of like, you can cut this out if you want, but
controversy coming.
Yeah, no, I think like, well, I don't know. I get annoyed when I hear people talk about like only like literary fiction or literature, and they're just like, and like you bring up, you're just like, oh, like I like this popular author, or like, not that I really like this author, but like James Patterson. Like you're like, oh, I enjoy reading James Patterson, and somebody goes, wow, you would read that, or you know, like that type of person. I'm gonna. That's just as not cool.
Right. I mean, that's kind of what I'm saying. Is like, if you're going to be hating on people, I don't like that you're doing that. I don't like.
Yeah, don't be a snob about what you read.
Right. Everyone has their preferences. Yeah. And, like, I get it. That's why there's so many books. Like, such a vast. Just. Yeah.
You could literally read Bigfoot erotica. It's a thing.
Oh gosh.
Look it up.
You could probably find. I mean, this is a book partially about poop.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Literally.
But, so kind of.
We went off on a tangent.
Yeah. Always. But going back into how this is written in journal entries, I feel like, great, I love that. But then when it cut to Back on Earth.
Yeah.
It was so off-putting. And there was even a part.
Oh, you didn't like that?
I know it was necessary for the book.
Yeah.
But I just did. I was off-putting, And especially the part where, like, I know. I like to make little notes. They don't
she likes to
necessarily.
annotate.
They don't necessarily mean anything.
Yeah,
but
no, she. What was that one that you had where like you had like a little sticky note that says, "Does Shoddy have a daddy kink?" It wasn't this book. It was so funny.
It was true though. Yeah. I guessed it.
I'm looking at her annotations. I'm expecting like, oh, I love the prose here, but
yeah. Clearly, I have very important thoughts that I feel like I should put down into my book. But hold on, I might make a cut to be able to find where my point is in the book. I have it written down.
Yeah.
I'll just cut this.
No, I want to talk about how like I don't have any sticky things in my book, and I just have it all up here in my noggin.
Every single sentence?
Every single sentence. Like, I'm just like, Mark Watney said this on page 275.
324. All right. This was towards the end. So, about halfway through the book, he made contact, or it cut to Earth where they realized he was still alive when they saw him on the satellites. And then they when they finally made contact, it was jumping between Mark Watney's journal entries and Earth and just the characters trying to get him back. But then there was a point in the book where... Like
Pathfinder died?
No. Well,
you're talking about like after Pathfinder died, and then like they didn't have contact, like Earth didn't have contact with Watney.
No, it's after that. It's when he was traveling, like just reached the
I said Delia Planetilia.
Yeah,
talking about the craters.
Yeah, the crater. And it like cut at the end of his journal entry, like it was still in the same chapter, and then it was like it had the little pregnant pause, and then it was just talking in or not necessarily third person, but it was just describing it wasn't third person, and it was describing what was happening, but it wasn't through his journal entry. Like it was so off-putting.
Oh yeah, there was one I know what you're talking about because it did happen at a certain point where he blows up his potatoes because he like for some whatever reason like the door malfunctions and then it explodes. Yeah, it was just like Mark Watney. After this time, a certain day, it felt like almost like reading like a journalistic like transcript. I don't know what you mean.
Yeah, that was at the beginning. That was the first time it did it, and then it did at the end. And this time it felt like useless because it was saying like in this moment, since he couldn't really process the explosion as it was happening, that was like saying this is the explosion, this is where things went and all that. So it gave the readers more of a context, but this was just like describing right after his vehicle flipped and all that, and like Mark Watney was still like awake and knew what was happening. It just felt weird. I felt like it could have been put in a journal entry, and it felt like I guess a stylistic choice, and I didn't necessarily like.
I think definitely the story thrives with his logs, and then like going like back to Earth, I didn't mind so much just because like it was a lot of dialogue, and you're getting a lot of characters like talking and explaining like kind of pushing the plot forward. And then just explaining like the logistics of like the politics of NASA.
Yeah.
Yada yada.
It was definitely interesting. Going off of that though, the characters. So all we had in the first third was Mark Watney trying to figure this out, and like a little bit of the crew, like what he knew of them. But then we get introduced to people back at NASA. Did you have any like people that you liked, characters that you liked?
Yeah. I loved, so it was Venkat Kapoor, and then I liked Teddy, and I'm forgetting his name, but he's the guy that basically, like, sent the message to the crew and forced them
Mitch.
to, like, do, Mitch. I love Mitch. Like, I loved all their interactions. Like, that was pretty cool. I really love character-based stories, and, like, not that I don't like plot. I love plot stories too, but my bread and butter is character-driven stories.
Yeah.
And I just loved them like jabbing at each other, like Venkat and like Teddy, like them going back and forth is funny, and like especially Mitch and Teddy because they like don't like each other, but they love each other. You know, like they're like brothers.
Yeah, I will say that Mitch and Teddy's dynamic when they were discussing on whether telling the crew that Watney was
it's like a moral question,
alive.
which was interesting.
Yes. Yeah. Very interesting, and I liked how Mitch decided to go against that. And
yeah, he forced his hand.
Yeah, and he was fighting so hard, and he really stood up for them, which I appreciated. That he stood up for the crew and Watney himself, and even after Watney said tell the crew what is wrong with you after they got in contact, they still were like, I don't know if we should. And Mitch was like, are you serious?
Yeah.
You guys are all just
he called
afraid.
them cowards. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's one part where Mitch is talking, where he's over in China. He's working with the Chinese version of NASA, and they come over and Venkat's talking to all the Chinese workers, and then Venkat's he's a handful. It's for Chinese workers your words, not mine. And then they go to talk to Mitch, and then he's just glad you guys are here, and he's just I think Venkat he says something they hate you. It's you're an asshole, Mitch, and he's whatever. Mitch was definitely my favorite.
Yeah, I liked the dynamic, but I honestly didn't like any of the characters. Mitch was.
I like Mindy, bro.
The girl.
Yeah.
I thought her name was Annie.
That was Mindy or something. I think it's Mindy Parker or something. I think we might both be messing this up. But it's Mindy. Yeah, she's just she was in charge of the satellites, and then she found Mark. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Okay, yeah. She was cool, but I feel like she didn't get enough story.
Well, her whole situation was kind of funny because she was just there watching the satellite, and then they promoted her. And then she's just kind of I feel like she's kind of a good character to add in there. It was a good, it's obviously there's not much depth to her, but she kind of takes on the role of seeing it through our eyes because she's so overwhelmed with the whole situation. And she's the average person's sort of perception of it.
That's
and then
true.
As the story goes on, she gets more confident. She goes back and forth with Venkat. It's kind of funny because she starts telling Venkat off at one point, and then Venkat's getting all snippy back with her. He's just wow, you're gonna say that to your boss, and she's you don't pay me enough. I was go Mindy.
Yeah, I feel she was tolerable, but again, she didn't have a lot of character depth, which I was I felt none of the characters did.
She was Pam in The Office.
That's true. Yeah.
But there's obviously Pam had more depth.
Yeah. Right, she was there for 9 seasons. 10.
Yeah.
Why can't I don't even know how.
Jim and Pam. Okay. We might have to cut this out if I get people to hate me because I have never seen the full length of The Office.
Wow.
I've seen that 70s show probably.
They should hate you. I'm leaving this in.
I've seen that 70s show probably 10 times over.
I have not seen a single episode from this.
Dude, you gotta watch it.
I don't even.
It's peak. It's how Ashton Kutcher.
You're a millennial.
It's how Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis got together. Literally.
Oh yeah, I mean I knew.
You don't know anything.
I know Gen Z.
No, literally Gen Z.
Okay, old man.
Bruh, I'm leaving.
But I feel I honestly couldn't tolerate a lot of the character. I did not like when they cut to Earth, and you can disagree with me on this because I feel this is a hot take, but especially Annie. I was a different character. Annie's the
oh, she's the PR person.
I absolutely hated her.
She was annoying. She was a bitch.
Well, okay, that's not true.
She was.
She
was just out of pocket for no reason.
She was out of pocket, and
yeah, and I was just I was reading her, and I'm oh, she's supposed to be the no nonsense girl, but she just comes off as a dick.
Well, he made her. I felt he was trying to make her a strong, independent woman that wasn't going to put up with stuff.
Yeah.
But all that he did to prove this was just have her say the F word 2 times in every single sentence.
The fuck word?
Listen, this is a family-friendly episode. Sorry. Okay. But yeah, she would be my fucking fuck. And it was
relax. Yeah.
That
was annoying.
It was childish. That part I was this isn't funny. She's intolerant.
I'm honestly on the same page. I thought she was very annoying. Nah, dude. So you're confusing. Yeah, Mindy is the goat.
Yeah, that was my bad. I forgot about it because honestly, they didn't do a lot with any of the characters. Like they introduced a lot.
It's a plot story. It definitely is just a plot story.
And I felt like, oh my gosh, the humor. So I loved Mark Watney's humor,
and like the crew also.
Yeah, and the crew. Yeah. I liked the crew's humor, but the humor when it came to On Earth, like
I felt there was a lot of moments where they're just kind of like you could tell like the situation was kind of crazy, and it goes without saying. Mm-hmm. Like you don't really need a character to vocalize it, but he'd make the character be like, "Are we seriously doing this right now?" Mm-hmm. And you're just like, it came off really corny and like I
forced. Yeah, it was like, oh my gosh. So this, I'm gonna read a part on page 199 of my book. This was right after when Rich, one of the characters, Rich, who barely got any part in the book, he found a plan that would send the crew back for Mark Watney instead of sending a separate ship with all the supplies and him having to wait for Ares 4. He decided to launch the food into space, and then the crew would swing by Pickett and then go back to Mars to get him earlier. And he's explaining this. He's explaining his plan for this to Kapoor, and he just like is clumsy in the beginning. He can't find his notes, which I feel like is so unprofessional. And like he tried to do it as like a quirky little thing, but like
he's like the science guy. It's just like he's super smart, but he's kind of socially awkward. Yeah, I don't like that trope either.
Yeah, it's just it's been used way too much, and it was unnecessary and unrealistic. And then he says after like trying to explain this, he says, "Oh, sorry, am I being difficult?" Rich asks. "I'm not good with people. Sometimes I'm difficult. I wish people would just tell me." And then he explains a little bit more. And then
I think Kapoor says, like, "You're being difficult, right?"
Yeah, so he says, Kapoor responds with, "Keep this under your hat." And Rich said, "I don't wear a hat." Kapoor said, "It's just an expression. Really, it's a stupid expression." And then Kapoor follows up with, "Rich, you're being difficult." It's like, why?
Yeah, that was a bit corny.
Yeah, it was very corny, and no one would seriously go through with that. And like,
yeah, especially this is like one of the top like people in NASA, and it's not like it's just a regular corporation. Like this is almost like very serious. Like it's yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am.
And they're trying to save the life of an astronaut, and he's like, "I'm sorry if I'm being difficult. Just tell me."
Yeah, it's like.
Keep this under your hat. That's so stupid.
I think we wouldn't have complained if it was funny.
Right. I don't know.
There's just like little moments like that. I know what you mean, especially back on Earth where they're just like, "Well, this is really crazy."
Yeah. He definitely tried to make this a humorous book throughout, but I feel like it would have been a good contrast if he had Mark Watney, like the one keeping his hopes up. He was literally known as like the guy that would always make a joke and brighten people's day, like on this trip. And so like it makes sense why he's lightening everything up, and it'd be a great contrast if it went from him trying to be the good guy and making everyone laugh, then cutting to Earth of where they're saying this is devastating, like we don't know how we're gonna do this. And like if they made it always serious while on Earth and like thinking of the worst possible situations, I feel like that would have been like a huge contrast, because it would have been Watney trying to avoid thinking about that maybe, and keeping his mind occupied with digging dirt or like other mundane tasks. That would have been interesting, seeing him like just avoiding it to preserve himself, but then NASA trying to make sure they get everything right was like thinking of the worst possible, which it was also silly how when they built their first probe, they were like, "Oh, we just won't test it at all." Like, I understand they were in a time crunch, but like, when would NASA realistically ever do that?
I like that part. I thought that was pretty realistic because they were rushing it, and like that makes a lot of sense. That like it all failed too. It makes sense that happened because like especially when you have I think that's something I just enjoyed that they really touched on that because I feel like a lot of times, especially when like things get a lot of PR, like it'll bring so much public attention onto it and like so much pressure that it literally affects your decisions. Like you have to appease people at a certain point, and I think that was like really, I liked that dynamic. I thought that like that also added to the plot a lot. Like not only was it like you like it beyond like in this story the whole time kind of you're worried about every decision that Watney makes, but then it's all put in the hands of NASA, and they royally screwed up.
I guess that's a good point. I'm glad like if it somehow made it, like that would have genuinely been a miracle and like so unrealistic. I would have been peeved if it was like, oh, we rushed this, and somehow it also totally worked, and now he's saved. I would have been like, that's a unclimactic part. I'm glad that it failed, and it actually led to one of my favorite lines, which I'll get to after I make this point. But like, I just felt like the actual like rushing and deciding not to test it once. Like I feel like they more realistically would have rationed his portions a little bit harder and just had him not collecting like rocks and other samples because they still had him doing that and using energy. I feel like if they just spread out his food just by even a couple more days, they could have at least ran a few tests. Like that would have felt more realistic. But it did lead to one of my favorite lines in this book. Let's see if I can find it on command.
I will say I don't feel like this is a very quotable book.
Definitely not. There were like I think 2 quotes that I was like, okay, wow, that like hit me. But other than that, I mean, there's a few things that like we could joke about.
Yeah, I guess in the context of like comedy or just like a cool moment, then maybe, but like, not like actual quotes from the book.
Not something I would put on like a little Pinterest board.
Not something I get a tat of.
Right, but when it said, this was right after they launched, and they thought like it was all hopeful, it made it into space, or like made it past like the first kind of atmosphere break. But then it said, Iris slipped from its supports into the aeroshell, slamming into the hole. Like my heart, I don't know, like it just sank in that moment. Even though I kind of assumed it wasn't going to work because of how little they did, I was like, maybe it was just the alliteration of the S's.
I really love that you don't remember the movie, or you did not remember the movie, because I remember in the movie seeing this, I knew what was going to happen when I was reading it, so it took away all the suspense, but I'm glad you had this experience for it.
Right. Yeah, and I even like could assume, but with just how it ran, like this, like just this page in general, explaining this, I thought it was super detailed.
Yeah.
The actual process, and I was like,
it was like an action scene almost.
Yeah, and I didn't expect it to work, but still, when it just, and that was the last sentence, and then it skipped, kind of going into like them at NASA saying like, oh, rates are dropping, whatever. Them explaining that, which wasn't as like it wasn't as impactful because they're just kind of like it's a lot of dialogue at that point.
Mm-hmm.
While this actually describing what the probe is doing, I was like, man, I feel for everyone that's about to see it, like that's watching it on TV.
Yeah. No, definitely. I love that. I love that you don't remember the movie. Because I remember reading that, and I was just like, I mean, I was reading it, and I was like hooked into it because I know what's going to happen, and I'm like there for it.
Right.
And it was like fun to read through that, but like, if you can't remember it, like it's so perfect for you.
Yeah. Because
like I would have been reading it, but like,
no. Right. No. Yeah. That was literally my reaction.
Yeah.
Yeah. I couldn't. Even though like there's slight parts that I'd be like, once I read it, I was like, oh yeah, I guess I remember that, but it didn't click in my head before that, which was very nice. Like I'm glad it had been so long. Because I had seen it.
Yeah.
Because I feel like it would have kind of ruined, or not necessarily ruined the book. I still think it's worth it, even if you have seen the movie plenty of times, because of
so much more detail.
Yeah. Yes.
It goes in.
I mean, it's impossible to fit this all into a movie.
Yeah, it would have been pretty long.
Yeah. So, that's what I would say about just the difference between Earth and Mars.
Yeah.
My main dislikes about the book was definitely the characters on Earth and like kind of forcing humor. Like I feel like there was more dynamic.
Yeah.
But
and then something we haven't really touched on. And then after this, I think we pretty much covered everything. But the characters, as far as the crew. So they were probably the most interesting characters besides Watney. Obviously,
a good dynamic.
Yeah, like the ones that stick out to me is Captain Lewis, Martinez, and Johansson. And I think my favorite out of that bunch is probably Johansson, just because like there's like this unspoken like kind of like thing where Watney will like mention Johansson like all the time, just like poking at her, and like they never interact, but like it's always so funny because like he like so Watney always goes back and forth like poking at the captain. Like they have like a good like mom / son relationship, and it's kind of funny. And then like between Johansson and like Watney, it feels like he's just poking at his sister, his like nerdy sister.
Like
and then there was one point, can't remember the page, but I thought it was just really funny where he would like Johansson was talking to him like through like the computer or whatever, and then like he says something, and she goes, "Not funny." And he's like, "My bad." And I was like, I love that. I think I love the dynamic between him and the crew, and like that was probably my favorite parts.
Yeah, even though they only got to like communicate once through like texting through the program, whatever, I can't remember. But once he finally got connected, through the Pathfinder, once he finally got connected, like we only had one occasion from like each crew member, but like only once, and even that was like memorable because you could actually feel the dynamic between them, which you never really felt with the characters back on Earth besides Mitch and Teddy.
And Kapoor.
I hated Kapoor, so I did not care. Not as much as Annie, but Kapoor just felt like I didn't understand why he was the main character either.
Yeah, he was kind of. I get what you're saying. Like he
main
was
character on Earth. I mean.
Yeah, he was kind of just like. He was not a very pushy character.
He's not memorable in any way. Like he didn't.
Yeah,
have
that's
any
a good point.
character.
I'm gonna take back what I said. Kapoor's kind of meh.
But I mean, he was involved in almost all the scenes of Earth, so you have to kind of.
They probably put him. He probably put him as the main one, just so he was involved in like every sort of aspect. So yeah.
But I liked the dynamic of the crew. I wish we got a little bit more, but of course it was unrealistic. But I would like seeing bits with them. I didn't really understand with the captain though. So of course.
Oh yeah, she blamed herself.
Yeah, I didn't get why that was ever brought up because it's an understandable reaction, but it never looped back around. Like.
You mean like her guilt?
Yeah, like.
Well, I think that was the whole driving force of like her making the decision. Not she didn't make the decision to come back. They all did, but like that was the main driving point of her wanting to get Watney back.
But I feel like even if she didn't have that, like she would still have been like that because that's kind of how they were as just a crew. I
think honestly, I thought that was a good touch because it's like survivor's guilt, especially when you're put in like she made the ultimate call to be like, we're getting out of there, we're gonna leave him, and like that's very human. That's very like.
Yes.
I thought that was a good touch.
I believed the reaction, but I felt like it could have been played out more. It wasn't that, like, I understand why she had that, and why she wanted to blame herself and not, like, the whole crew. But, like, I felt like you could have done so much more, which, again, kind of loops back, and the psychological aspect wasn't touched on as much.
Yeah. Yeah, because, like, it didn't really, show any logs of her, like, upset or anything. It was more so just like something that she went through by herself. I think I see what you're saying. Yeah, I would have liked to see more about that too, but at the same time, I was happy with what I got.
Overall, it was very well rounded.
Yeah, and I liked and that was my favorite parts, like Martinez and like Watney, Captain Lewis, Johansson, and then there was like Johansson's boyfriend, and then like the German guy, which were kind of forgettable.
I think they were good But again, you could have done more with them. Like, I don't think the characters themselves had any issues, but there really wasn't that much. Like, it was.
Yeah.
Gosh.
I literally introduced that one character as Johansson's boyfriend. Don't remember his name.
It was like Beck. It started with a B. I think it was Beck.
I think that's from the book I'm reading right
now. No, that's what I was gonna say.
Yeah, I think maybe. I don't know. That's the point. He's forgettable. He's not important.
Yeah, that's how I felt about a lot of the characters.
Yeah.
Which I'm not the best at memorizing names, but like if I'm reading a book about it, like, and there were a lot of characters introduced.
Yeah, a ton. I love Johansson though. Just like I thought she was so funny, man. Yeah. Just like she was definitely like. I think it reminds me of people that I would definitely like gravitate toward and just like poke at. You know what I mean?
Right. You love being the older millennial brother.
Yeah, that's just like I love being like the older brother figure that goes into like the sister's room and just leaves the door. Annoying. Yeah, leaves the door open and just like flips him off and leaves.
That's why you're so annoying every time we talk. Wow. Yeah.
I would definitely mess with Johansson.
Yeah,
and not to mention in the movie, the actress that plays her is, I have a massive crush on her.
Good to know.
Yeah, but now the internet knows.
I don't remember the actors. Except, oh my gosh, literally, I almost forgot to mention it. I felt like reading this book, like I could only imagine
Chris Pratt.
And I genuinely thought, like tricked myself into thinking that was actually who played him.
Yeah,
and I had to look it up, and I was like, it's not Chris Pratt.
Yeah, because we're at like the Starbucks at the college we go to, and we're sitting there like talking about it. She's like, oh, I think like I've seen the movie, and she's like, yeah, Mark Watney is Chris Pratt, and I'm just like, no. She's like, yeah, it is.
I thought because he would literally be perfect in this role.
No, yeah, I think that's a missed opportunity. But I think that's also a little bit before Chris Pratt.
I was about to say, the Chris Pratt at where he is now would have been perfect, but this wasn't produced now, so.
No, yeah, like that would have been a perfect. Like I think if it was casted now, then it would be Chris Pratt. And like not to say that like Matt Damon. Well, that's different. You know what? We can't really talk much about this because that's the movie.
Well, I had to go on that movie. But I will round this out by saying who, overall, I think would enjoy this book. And, like, just people that, in general, like to dive into theories about space and, like, what you could do. And that specifically on Mars. And obviously we don't know if any of this is technically plausible, but we've, like...
It's, like, the most scientifically accurate story.
That's what I'm basically trying.
It's popular.
Yeah.
Like I think even if you have like a mild interest in anything sort of scientific or like space travel or botany or anything like that, if you have any sort of mild interest in any of those, which is like me, you're still gonna enjoy this.
If you ever wanted to be an astronaut at any point of your life,
which every kid has ever been like, I want to be an astronaut.
Or specifically the first person on Mars, which was this person right here, for several years as a kid. I was convinced I was going to be the first person on Mars.
No way.
Still hasn't happened.
Wait, actually? Are you in for real?
Yeah. That was like my for several years too. Like it was like end of elementary school to middle school. I was like, this is going to happen. That's going to be me. And still, no one's been on Mars yet. So I'm not saying that it still won't happen, even though I'm not at all towards the path of being an astronaut. I might switch my life around after this book. Might go for that again. And hopefully be the first stranded person.
Ryan?
What flag would I put on there?
Pride flag.
That'd be a good time. I mean, I feel like it'd pop on like this red atmosphere.
I actually kind of would.
Yeah. But also people that just enjoyed The Big Bang Theory, but like wanted good humor instead.
Yeah, like something actually funny. Yeah.
I feel like you would love this book. Like if you watched Big Bang Theory and you grew up and you're like, wow, it's half laugh tracks, and I want something to actually make me laugh. Right here, this book.
Yes. Big Bang Theory. I stand by this, and I will put this out on the internet. It sucked. Not funny.
I don't even necessarily hate it. I never watched it that much, but I've seen like
every time it was on, I was just like, no. Like, and I'm like, I liked Drake and Josh. I liked iCarly. Like, I liked all the kiddie sitcoms. I think everybody did, honestly.
Drake and Josh was a classic.
And then iCarly is also hilarious.
iCarly, yes. I mean, Spencer, come on.
Dude, Spencer's iconic.
But yeah, I feel like I've seen clips of like genuinely funny moments, but it is ruined by the laugh track. And I've never watched a full episode of Big Bang Theory, which says a lot. So
Yeah,
it didn't interest me that much.
No, there's no way I could sit through a full episode.
But if you are like heavily interested in it and would like to kind of dive into that too, but dive into a book that goes into that and have a good time. We're just being mean.
Yeah. Honestly, we're getting way too comfortable right now.
Yeah, we're open to any enthusiast, any Big Bang enthusiast. It's okay. This is a comfortable safe, even though we've been dogging on you this whole time. Yeah. We are here for you.
I can't believe you actually laughed at that. Like,
oh my God.
This is a good book.
Yeah. Let us know if you have read this book and your thoughts on it. And
leave a comment, like the video, subscribe.
Let us know if you're interested in this book after like we're watching.
Yeah.
Hopefully not through all the spoilers because that would kind of suck. But I guess you wouldn't really be watching this.
Yeah, I don't think anybody really like if you watch book reviews and you haven't read the book. That's kind of crazy.
You are ballsy, bold to be going. I can't do it because I will feel upset if I actually realize, wow, this book would definitely interest me, and now I know everything about it.
Yeah. But anywho, I think we're done here.
Yeah, we'll see you next week with our movie review.
Yes, and then after that, another book review, and then after that, another movie review.
That is how it works. Yeah, we're switching off.
Yeah.
But yeah. All right. Deuces.